Telling the judge this afternoon that they cannot reach a verdict on count one, that is on the racketeering and conspiracy charge, but they said that they have reached verdicts on the 4 other counts.
And that includes sex trafficking by force, fraud or coercion, and transportation to engage in prostitution. These counts involve Cassie Ventura.
Count 4 is sex trafficking by force, fraud, or coercion, and count 5 is transportation to engage in prostitution. Now, these 2 counts involve the other alleged victim, who has been identified only as Jane.
Now, we don't know yet whether the verdicts are guilty or not guilty. The judge wants the jury to continue deliberating on count 1, and that will resume tomorrow
at 9 a.m. Eyewitness News reporter Darla Miles has been in the courtroom. She's joining us live outside right now with much more on the very significant developments this afternoon. Darla.
Liz and Bill, this was a significant development. This note came around 4:05 p.m. and this note came after the jury asked for a robust list of testimony that they wanted to review. So everyone thought that this was the note saying we are planning to retire for the day and return tomorrow. So during this point, when we realized that there was a note, Sean Combs was brought back into the courtroom, as he always is. He is in a holding cell outside of the court. He comes back into the courtroom, and when he enters the court, his attorneys show him a picture of the note on their cell phone. That is when we knew something was going on, because you could see his brows furrow and a surprise reaction. He then proceeded to sit in his chair at the defense table, and his army of attorneys, he has 9 defense attorneys, they surrounded him when you saw him sit back into his chair like the gravity of the moment. Again, at this point, the court does not know what the note says, but defense attorneys know what it says. Prosecutors know what it says, and Sean Combs knows what it says. So then what we see this emotion, this affection, all the attorneys being affected. We see Nicole Westmoreland, his attorney from Atlanta, literally rubbing her temples. We see Brian Steele, whatever is going on with the conversation, you see his eyes are blinking and he's like snapping. We see Tinny Garagos, as she's contributing to this discussion as they are huddled. She's shaking her head. She's shaking her head furiously. So we don't know what's going on, but we know it's a big thing. Then at one point, Mark Agnifilo, he storms away from this huddle of attorneys. He goes to the front of the court. He retrieves the note. I see the note that's kind of ripped from a notepad. He puts it in front of Sean Combs. Sean then reads the actual note for himself, and they send it back to the front of the court. Now, at this point, again, everybody knows the note is big, but we do not know that it's a partial verdict. But we do see people begin to file inside of the courtroom. What happens when these notes come back, they give people time to return to the courtroom, and specifically they need to have the court reporter return to the courtroom. So about 20 minutes go by, you see his 6 children return. First his 3 daughters, then his 3 sons, then the mothers of 2 of his other children are in the courtroom. His mother, Janice Combs, she's 84 years old. She's always in the courtroom every day. And during this period where this watch and wait before this note is read to the court, you see Sean Combs cross his legs. He's putting his hands on his leg, and he just kind of sits down in kind of a meditative state. So that is how that happened. Now, when the court reads this note, everyone's shocked because, again, no one knows this note is coming. And this is when this high-stakes negotiation between prosecutors and defense attorneys began about exactly how to respond to the jury. Because remember, whatever the notes say and whatever that response is, both sides want that note and that response to be favorable to what their party, to what they believe their case is. So you have prosecutors with a more serious proposition, a proposal. Then you have defense attorneys. They send in a proposal. It's dead silent in the courtroom while all of this has happened. They're typing it up. They're sending it to the court. And then that is when Judge Arun Subramanian says, listen, I have the proposal from both sides. There's arguing on both sides. And then they decide to bring the jury back into the courtroom to reread a portion of the jury instructions about how they are supposed to proceed. Now, the jury files into the courtroom. Remember, this is their 8th week sitting in this chair. And surprisingly, there was no emotion on any of their faces as they were reread the jury instructions on how to proceed, to follow the law. They need to hold fast to their opinions and their beliefs, but they also need to make sure they are following the law and their instructions. There was only one juror you could tell directive coming, where she just kind of shook her head and smiled, and they were sent back into the jury room to deliberate. And they were also told, listen, if you want to conclude your deliberations for the day, send us a note, back out, and we will proceed accordingly. So that's kind of like the nuts and bolts of this dramatic moment that happened late in court today. Bill, Liz.
It certainly seemed, Darla, that today, during the course of this 7-week trial, Sean Combs really had as much as he could be, a relaxed demeanor throughout all of this, but that seemed to dramatically change this afternoon.
You know, I would not call his demeanor relaxed. What I would say is you have seen Sean Combs, the mogul. He is sitting in his seat. He's like game face ready. He's writing notes. He's interacting with his attorneys. He's looking at evidence. He's reminding them of things to do. I will say this is this is not the first emotion that we've seen, because the very first day of trial, he said he was a little bit nervous. He had butterflies. But today, you could see him just be still in the moment. Now, remember, Bill and Liz, yesterday there was that moment when the courtroom was closed, but we saw from closed circuit cameras where he and 2 rows of his family, they stood, they held hands, and they prayed. So that is kind of the emotion that I would say we saw from Sean Combs today. He was still, he was quiet, maybe internally meditating and praying that it would be favorable to him.
Darla, you've done a remarkable job
really
painting a picture of what it was like in the courtroom today and the anxiety and during those very tense moments this afternoon.
Darla, you said just a moment ago that it was a meditative state that he seemed to be in. I thought that was really fascinating about you. Great reporting there. Real quick question. Any word from the judge about how many times they're going to say, hey, you got to go and finish this? You can't just come back and say no tomorrow. Did he say anything like that?
So there will be. Absolutely. So there is a progression. So the final progression is what we all know as an Allen charge, and that is that's a legal term for a directive to the jury. Listen, you have to deliberate on this. You have to come to a decision. You cannot think that another jury is going to reach another verdict. And so that was what prosecutors wanted to deliver to the jury right now. But defense attorney said, no, let's take a more relaxed approach. Listen, this jury has only been deliberating a day and a half. So let's give them more time. So they met in the middle. They reaffirmed the jury instructions. So tomorrow they will deliberate some. And now, mind you, the court is closed on Thursday. If they have not reached a verdict, there is a world where they will open the court on Thursday specifically for deliberations. There was wrangling about that. Prosecutors saying, let's tell them now that they may have to come back on Thursday. Defense attorneys were like, no, because we don't want them to feel pressured tomorrow to reach a verdict. So again, every single inch, every single yard, prosecutors' defense wanting to get the message to the jury that they believe will be favorable to their case. But this could go on for however long Judge Arun Subramanian deems it necessary before he says there's no longer deliberation on count 1.
Okay. That was just great reporting, and really interesting that you got all that information just in this day today, watching very carefully. Darla Miles, really appreciate it. We'll see you back here tomorrow again. Thank you, Darla.
All right, joining us now is ABC News legal analyst Channa Lloyd, who has been following this trial from the very beginning. Channa, thank you so much for joining us. We do want to talk about the other counts, but let's begin with this count 1 that they are hung up on. You know, when they sent back this note late this afternoon, they were saying several jurors had very strong opinions on either side. So talk to us a little bit about the psychology of a jury, as they have already said, we're hung on this. When they resume tomorrow, how do they start to get momentum back to try to come to some sort of consensus?
Well, the good thing is once they've taken this night, it gives everyone a moment to cool off. It gives them a cooling off period where they can reconsider the arguments that their other jurors have made. They can also solidify their arguments. So when they come back in, they're going to come in fresh. They're going to come in with new ideas and new thoughts. And so we'll see them rehash that to see if they can come up with a verdict or if they are going to continue to be at a stalemate. It'll also tell us how far apart they are, how long before we get that first note.
We are not lawyers like you are, so we don't really know about this, but let's just take a look at this. In the 5 o'clock half hour, they said, a guest on our show said, hey, we don't know what the verdicts are yet, but if I were a defense lawyer, the guy said, on our air, I'd be very worried. Why did he say that?
So typically what we find is that if it comes back very quickly, they say that it's going to be a guilty verdict. My answer to that is that it means that the jury was in sync when they got in there. Because typically what jurors are going to do, they're going to take an assessment. Are there charges we agree on already? So we can focus on the ones that we don't agree on. So it means that either side, someone made their case and made it very well for them to come in there on one accord about certain charges.
Why do you think that this jury is having such a difficult time? I mean, the racketeering charge is very convoluted.
It is. It's very involved, and there's so many layers. So first, we know we have the predicate crimes. They have to agree on which predicate crimes. Underneath each offense, they have to decide, is it the arson? Is it the aiding and abetting?
The bribery.
Exactly. So not only do they have to decide on 2 categories, but they then have to decide which level of offense. Then we move forward. They also have to decide that there is a co-conspirator and that they were in agreement. We saw a lot of text messages where who they're calling the enterprise, remember the prosecution is alleging that's his bodyguards, his personal assistant, and his co-conspirator KK, his chief of staff, that there was agreement. We saw a lot of text messages that said that they were not in agreement, that he was lying to them. They weren't aware of what was happening. So that also adds something that's very complex to this charge.
And what did you think when you heard Darla talk about the meditative state that he was in?
Listen, when you go into a trial like this, I tell this to my defendants all the time. When you're going through trial, you're so busy trying to make your point. You're thinking about it. You are living for the moment. You are listening to testimony. You want to be able to interact with your attorney. But when that jury comes back, that's when the true weight of what you are facing hits you. That is when you suddenly feel the magnitude of these charges. And some of these carry up to a life sentence. It's a very heavy feeling.
That's what I wanted to ask you. The charges that we were talking about, that there is currently a verdict on, sex trafficking and prostitution.
Correct.
Sex trafficking carries a minimum of 15 years.
This is extensive time we're talking about, and we have multiple charges. So this is something that he's looking at. This could be the rest of his life. That's significant.
If just a couple of these counts are guilty, that's bad news for him.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Doesn't have to be all those at all.
No, it doesn't have to be all.
Gut feelings?
So I've said from the beginning, in all honesty, I expected a hung jury on the RICO charge, and I believe that there will be, of all the charges, I think the one that I think the jury may potentially convict on would be the trafficking of Cassie Ventura. The transportation and prostitution. I don't know that I'll see convictions on the others.
Which is a minimum of 15 years in prison, but could also go up to life.
Absolutely.
Right. He's 55 years old. That's a long time.
Absolutely.
As always.